Today, we're exploring dialectical behavior therapy and not just the basics. We're going deeper into what happens when these tools go mainstream, when self-control becomes a prison instead of a strength, and how we help people who are drowning emotionally but look perfectly fine on the outside. If you're new here, I'm Monica with the CFT Institute. We train therapists, counselors, and spiritual leaders in a framework approach that combines neuroscience with faith. And today I'm here with my friend, Christy Cole. Christy is a licensed clinical mental health counselor with a Master of Arts in Counseling. She's certified in DBT, CDBT specifically, and she's also trained in EMDR, trauma resiliency, Gottman's couple approach, EFT, and internal family systems, and I think betrayal trauma, all the things, right? So Christy, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, Monica. It's good to be here today.
Yes. You and I have been working together for quite some time, longer than anyone else that we're both working with. We just counted up 7 years. Well, 7 years at this practice, but we were together several years before this. And you just hit your 10th year as a mental health professional. Congrats on your anniversary.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the subject of DBT, of which you are a specialist. And so tell our audience, what drew you to this work, and specifically what made DBT become such a central part of how you help people move from surviving to thriving?
Sure. So I've worked with a lot of adolescents, young adults, and in that work, I found that having skills and tools and resources to help them in those moments where their emotions can feel so overwhelming, or they might not even necessarily know how to identify and label those emotions, which is of course necessary to be able to regain, move through them in a healthy way, and be able to respond differently.
Yes. Oh, DBT is awesome. And I know I got trained because you were trained, and I was like, oh, this is awesome stuff. I've been using it, and just sitting under your trainings for the last several years. And I love having it, love how you incorporate this in the way that you treat clients. And I'd like to start with more of a foundation here as we begin this discussion. A lot of people have heard the term DBT thrown around. I mean, we have doctors that are saying, go to DBT therapy, and clients are like, well, I don't even know what this is.
Right.
Maybe on social media, we hear people talking about it, other therapists, but not everyone knows what it is and how it's different from other models. Can you give a very clear, simple explanation, Christy? What is dialectical behavior therapy? Who originally designed it, and what makes it unique?
Sure. So DBT actually stands for Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. And what a dialectic really is two things. If you think about two things that might seem like they're in opposition of one another, can be true at the same time. So for example, I can make a statement like, I'm doing the best I can with the knowledge and information that I have right now, and I still need to continue to grow and improve and do better. Both of those things can be true at the same time. And so what DBT does is it takes that foundational principle, which was founded by Marsha Linehan, and I think she herself had a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder and trouble regulating her emotions, and that's what caused her to be interested in and then ultimately create this modality. And so through that, it really is designed with 4 different modules, and that is mindfulness, distress tolerance skills, interpersonal effectiveness skills, and emotion regulation skills.
Okay. Yes, very succinct, and all that we've been practicing in terms of how we approach this with ourselves and our clients. I think as clinicians, we need to be practicing these 3 types of ways of being in the world, right? And
Of
so most
course.
people think of DBT as something just for people who are emotionally explosive, like impulsive,
Mm-hmm.
self-destructive, out of control, even suicidal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you've also written about RODBT, or radically
Mm-hmm.
open DBT, which targets the complete opposite problem of over control.
Mm-hmm.
These people are more high achievers, the
Mm-hmm.
perfectionists, the people who look like they have it all together, but are really actually suffering from crippling anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
loneliness, rigidity, or manager parts, as we'd say in the IFS world.
Yes.
They're so controlled that they can't connect
Mm-hmm.
relationally, correct? So here's
Yes.
what I want to know from you. Do you think we're living through an over control epidemic right now, especially with younger
Mm-hmm.
generations being raised in a performance driven, social media curated environment? And if
Mm-hmm.
so, how do we even recognize over control when it looks a lot like success? What's the
Mm-hmm.
difference and how do we recognize it?
Yes. Yes. And so even that word, I feel like there's implications with that word success and what we're really striving towards in attempting to achieve that. And I absolutely do see our society reinforcing what in an IFS lens we would call managers that are controlling that person. And I think that when I think about my time with clients and they share with me that they feel exhausted because really it's almost like putting on that mask, and it's lacking the authenticity where they can be vulnerable enough to connect with other people. And so I think social media and all the information that is carefully curated is not a true representation of what is happening, right? And so I think uh, when I see that in someone that's really striving and is very performance based, then I would see potentially some over control there. And if they can work on these DBT skills and apply them well, that can help them to really connect with and have a much better awareness of their own emotions, how to process through them and metabolize their pain so that they are better able to connect with others in an authentic, meaningful way.
Oh, yes. That is beautifully said, Christy. And I know we're kind of throwing out that IFS language too, which is internal family systems, by the way, or
Yes.
BTW, right? Like we're using
Yes.
all the acronyms here, which we do a lot in therapy, but um these parts of us can vary. Like I almost think of it like I call it a body double sometimes, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm acting out of this manager or over control part of me as a way
Mm-hmm.
of surviving my life, as a way of
Mm-hmm.
coping with the environment I'm in, and with all the pressure toward being successful in the eyes of who, of
Mm-hmm.
parents, of teachers, of
Right.
peers. We have this epidemic of people coming up and either having over control or under control, like, well, I can't match that, so let me just kind of spiral emotionally
Mm-hmm.
and be more
Mm-hmm.
problematic. So
Yeah.
one more cultural tension I want to address, though, Christy, is that we're surrounded by messages telling us to choose joy, stay positive,
Mm-hmm.
vibes only. I mean, we see the t-shirts or the posters or
Mm.
whatever, but DBT teaches something so radically different than that. It teaches us
Yes.
to validate and accept our difficult emotions. Like we're
Yes.
integrating them into our understanding of ourselves and the way that we see ourselves, like with the urge
Mm-hmm.
surfing and the emotional regulation um, activities that we teach. Instead of suppressing, we're supposed to validate and accept. So, Christy, how do you help clients, especially teens, understand the difference between healthy emotional regulation and toxic positivity? Because I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people are confusing staying calm with pretending
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine while I'm
Right.
actually falling apart.
Right. Yeah. Pretending I'm fine to feel like I can be accepted. And so I do feel like I would identify that as a suppression of the emotion, pushing it down or pushing it away, minimizing suffering.
Mhm.
And so DBT talks a lot about that. and how to be able to identify the emotion and process through it in a healthy way so that I can genuinely move forward and move on from it. Our emotions in and of themselves are not problematic. A lot of times clients will say to me, "Oh, well, I have this bad emotion," and categorize them as good or bad emotions. And so we talk a lot about what is your response to that emotion, and can we process through that instead of feeling a sense of shame or a need to suppress that to be accepted or to be enough. You are enough right where you are.
Yeah. This reminds me of the life model concept of tender to weakness, right? Like, how
Yes.
can we be tender to our own weakness and this process? But I'm getting ahead of myself because we're going there. So, Christy, I wanted to, as we are furthering this conversation, talk a bit about some of the blogs that you have put out there about DBT. It's one of the things that our practice gifts to our community and to the world, frankly, is some writings that we do based on
Mm-hmm.
the specialties that we have. So you've written
Mm-hmm.
a blog series called Three States of Mind, and one
Mm-hmm.
of the articles is recognizing where we are. So one of the concepts from your blog that really struck me was the idea of the three states of mind: the emotion mind, the rational mind, and the wise mind. This
Mm-hmm.
feels like the framework for understanding how we make decisions under stress. Can you walk us through what each of these states actually feels like in the body, and how you teach clients,
Mm-hmm.
especially teens, to recognize which state they're operating from in
Mm-hmm.
real time in the session?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So the first piece of this that I like to explain is that each one of us has an existence of these three states. And so there is going to be a fluctuation and oscillation between emotional mind and rational mind. And so we can set a goal of returning to wise mind, which represents the integration of emotional mind, our emotions, our feelings, what we're experiencing in our minds and in our bodies, along with rational mind, which is more of logic and reason. And it's in its more extreme form that can look like detachment from your emotion. It can be feel very cold and aloof to others as they experience you. On the other spectrum of that, in emotional mind, in its more extreme version, can look we think of it as being hot, right? Like a hot emotion, like anxiety or anger, and it can be uncontrolled in an extreme form. And so our goal really is to try to recognize and respect our emotions and be able to integrate that with logic and reasoning and our understanding. And as we do that, that can lead us to a place of health. And I believe that that is where our true self um, resides and exists. So returning to wise mind is more a representation of who we really are from a life model perspective, um, as opposed to parts of ourselves, wounded parts of ourselves that hold pain that we have experienced in the past, from showing up and being in charge. So one example that I like to use with my clients is, if you're familiar with the Big Bang Theory television show, I think one of the main characters, Sheldon Cooper, is a really great example of what it looks like when you attempt to suppress emotion that absolutely exists, and you attempt to over control that and rely only on facts and logic, divorcing yourself from experiencing the emotions of others and experiencing your own emotions. And so that's a good case study to take a look at, to learn how to be able to incorporate both, which happens over the course of time.
Oh, I love how you're pulling in the sitcom information. It's Sheldon, right? My daughter's been watching that young Sheldon, right? So
Yes.
it's helpful because that's a real life example that's
Mhm.
really helpful for us to hear about. And I want to go even further here and mention something else your blog said, something so powerful that distress tolerance helps you get through difficult times without making them worse. That's the
Mhm.
key, right? It's not about
Mhm.
solving the problem in the moment. It's about not doing something destructive while you're
Yes.
overwhelmed.
Yes.
And I know you work a lot with teens who self-harm. I mean, you and
Mhm.
I started our practices with a lot of that.
Yes.
And can you walk us through how distress tolerance specifically helps with urges to cut or
Mhm.
to engage in self-destructive behaviors? What does this intervention actually look like as you apply
Mhm.
it to the work with the client in the session?
Sure. There are specific skills within DBT, for example, the stop skill that helps you step by step to walk through managing those urges. And my language around this is to be able to create enough space in
Mm-hmm.
surfing that wave of emotion, in finding alternative healthy ways of managing it. And that's a process, right? So if someone is self-harming, we do look for alternative means for them to be able to work through that as they are building up, and really working towards implementing the skills of DBT, to where that becomes their new way of coping, right? And so within like the stop skill, for example, it teaches us to pause and to not act on those urges. And so instead of responding very rapidly and making it worse potentially, right, by injuring yourself, instead, we're able to slow down, recognize what's happening, and respond to it in a different way from a space of mindfulness with an awareness of what I'm thinking, feeling, and how I'm experiencing that in my body. And that is so key to be able to make a difference in your response, knowing and understanding how that feels in your body and being able to use another skill of urge surfing through that.
Hmm. That's great, Christy. I'm just thinking about like being in grad school and how we have to write a paper on your philosophy of change, and how I just remember thinking, I don't know if people can change. Like it's so hard to change,
Mm-hmm.
especially if these emotional
It is.
dysregulation behaviors that are associated, that have been a part of your life since your whole life, and you inherited that brain that does that. And so these are really some skills that you teach, and that the DBT RODBT teaches, that really do help you to change your behaviors, those things that aren't
Mm-hmm.
helping you live out your best self. And I'll just say, Christy, you're doing great, like getting through a lot of content here. And so I'm just going to keep asking you questions because I think our audience really is going to benefit from all that you have to say. So let's go back a little bit to the RODBT, the radically open dialectical
Mm-hmm.
behavioral therapy, just for a moment. One thing that stood out in your blog was how over-controlled individuals mask their emotions to appear in control,
Mm-hmm.
but that mask actually creates distrust and disconnection in
Mm-hmm.
relationships. Can you explain a bit about how that cycle works? How does hiding your pain, even with good intentions, end up making you lonelier in the outcome?
Mm-hmm. That's so true. Yes. So I think I can give an example and say, let's imagine that someone does that in a relation to having a conversation with a family member. I've had clients walk away from conversations like that when they exert that over control and say things like, I feel like they don't get me. Others are never going to understand me. I feel so alone in this. And or also feeling like I'm afraid to express that because I'm afraid that it might be too much. I'm afraid that I will be rejected if I expose, my feelings, right? And so to address that, part of what we talk about is what we've talked about thus far, right? Being able to process through and work through your own emotions internally to be able to try to get to a place where, in using the skills over time, creating new habits in the brain, new neural pathways in the brain, so that you can, over the course of time, connect more and more. It's going to be hard at first, right? But it will get easier over time with that practice. And so, having a little bit of a faith walk there, that if I invest in this and if I practice these skills diligently over time, what will happen is I will be able to show up more present, mindful, and aware, and much and better able to rapidly work through what I'm experiencing when it does come up. I don't have to be so afraid of it anymore because I know what to do. I can work through that, and I can do that quickly enough to where I'm then able to stay present with that other person and connect with them in an authentic way and share. And then my brain can receive that message that I was vulnerable. I stepped out on that, tightrope, and I got good feedback, or it was okay. I didn't fall off the cliff in that moment. And so I think that's part of how that can be worked through, so that someone doesn't feel as lonely.
Mhm. Oh, Chrissy, I just want to commend you. You're very well spoken on all these topics. You come to the table with such expertise, and I know that comes about in your writing, but as you're explaining it, and I know I've had the privilege of sitting under you as you talk about DBT, as you do in-service trainings for us and our team. And even without preparing, you have so much to offer because this has really become a part of your story. And I know as we transition here to the final part um, of this recording, I want you to think about the life model and how the life model and
Mm,
DBT intersect. You and I learned about the life model about the same time. We got
hmm
excited about it. We started implementing it with the clients we work with in the practice that we were at before this one. And here we are, running a life model practice here together and implementing it a lot, even more in the last 7 years than we did the prior 3. So let's bring this home for all the clinicians listening. I want to walk through a real world scenario and hear how you'd apply DBT within the framework of the life model.
hmm
So just to ask you more specifically, what are the best concepts that you've taken from the life model that have strengthened how you use DBT with your clients?
Sure. So I think thinking about what Life Model teaches about our relational circuits, and it talks about and gives a very specific list to be able to know and recognize and identify when our relational circuits are off. And so when you think about someone that's utilizing DBT, or like we talked about, someone who's exerting over control, and we're applying RODBT, both of those would fit into this, right? It's necessary and important for us to be able to understand when that is happening. And so Life Model gives us that list, and it also talks about what we're able to do, what our brains are able to do when those circuits are online, what it looks like and feels like, and what is happening when they're dim or when they're completely shut off, and gives us a framework on how to get those relational circuits back online. And so I feel like that fits perfectly in with DBT, along with the brain science that we have from the life model when we think about right brain, where our emotions reside and our behavior is born out of, and that it fires quicker than our left brain, which brings in our logic and reasoning, and being able to use those DBT skills within that life model framework, right? To be able to say, this is going to help us and help our left brain catch up with and attune to our right brain so that we can show up in that moment from that space.
Ah, well said, Christy. And it just making me think about even the serenity prayer that when as Christians
Mm-hmm.
we practice DBT, that God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot
Mm-hmm.
change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I can incorporate neurology and spirituality into this approach of DBT, just like we do with Life Model. And they do inform one another. And it
Mm-hmm.
gets us excited as we're practicing Life
Mm-hmm.
Model. Oh, this fits with DBT, or DBT. Oh, this fits with Life Model. And it's all God's truth. This is what we know. So I'm being a little stingy here. I know we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you one last question, and we'll see if we can get this one done, and then we'll say goodbye to our listeners. Um,
Sure.
I want to see the flip side. How do you practically use the life model within your DBT approach? For example, when you're working with someone, are you
Mm-hmm.
thinking about their brain state before teaching them distress tolerance? When you're working with an over
Mm-hmm.
control client, are you assessing their attachment style or their capacity for joy?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does that work within your own mindset, your own expertise?
Yes. So absolutely. I use the life model reference for attachment style. And we want to know and identify that to be able to understand how to apply these DBT skills. So that absolutely feels like a necessary part. Something else that I would apply in RODBT and DBT from the life model is the shalom for the body skill set to understand how to regulate our bodies and
Mhm.
know and understand what's happening so that I am able to then better identify my emotions and be able to use the skills, as well as shalom for the soul. I oftentimes use the VCR method, which stands for validation, comfort, and repatterning, and knowing and understanding, sharing some psychoeducation with my clients on how that works in their brain from a life model perspective. And it's necessary for us to receive that validation, receive that comfort to be able to then create a new pattern. So exactly what we just talked about in that example a few moments ago feels very relatable to that, to understand what needs to happen for me to be able to show up and to actually over time affect change.
Yes, yes, yes. That's amazing. And I can totally relate to that, but you put it into really clear language. And I think that's what we do as therapists. We kind of toggle in and out, and we find a way to utilize these models that we've learned, that we've integrated into our own lives, and then adapt them in the session with the client. I heard you just now refer to Standard Protocol 1, and so if anybody who's listening has not accessed that standard protocol, please do. In that this is where the skills are learned for life model, and DBT is a great accent, especially when working with dysregulated or over controlled clients. So Christy, I'm so thankful for the time together today. It's great when we get to spend a little, we see each other passing in the hall, but we don't often get a chance to sit and just talk and share.
Yes.
And I've really enjoyed being with you today.
Oh, you as well, Monica. Always thankful for our time together.
Always a joy, yes. And so what we really want to remind our audience is that healing spreads when therapists learn to live in joy. So until next time, we'll see you soon.